All right, super. All righty, so we'll start. Okay, so I wanted to speak about the book of Bereshit today as sort of a takeaway from the Chag of Hanukkah. I want to talk about some important concepts, core concepts. There are core concepts in the book of Bereshit. There are core concepts in Yahadut, in Judaism. There are core concepts in our lives, in how we build our children, and so on. I want to do it in the context of Bereshit. All right. So, as always, we're going to do some challenging things, God willing. I want to hear your thoughts, any pushback, and let's work it. The first point. Hi, Jane. How are you? The first point that I want you to begin to think about is that the book of Bereshit shouldn't be looked at as the story of the creation of the world, and then the story of the Mabul, let's say, the flood, and then the story of Abraham and Lot and Abraham's children and so on. It shouldn't be looked at that way. It should be looked at as a platform for us to understand how HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in this world and how we live with him. All right? I want you to, hi Diane, I want you to take a step back from the storyline itself. I want you to go up to 10,000 feet, so to speak, and look at it as a way for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to explain life. The book of Bereshit is the book of life. It tells us about all kinds of possibilities and how we approach things and how we understand HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Good? So we're going to start with that, yeah? All right. Okay, everybody okay with that so far? Good, okay. Let's put it into a context. Let's create the context. So we have the story of Yaakov Avinu and Yosef HaSadik and the brothers, right? We're going to talk about 4 or 5 parashiot in the Chumash and link them all together. And again, we're going to jump up to the 10,000 foot level, and we're going to take the lessons that we can use in all of our learning and in our lives in general. HaKadosh Baruch Hu starts to tell the story, right? And the story of Yaakov, you need to know, is the most shared story of any of our forefathers. There's more written about Yaakov than everybody else put together. And that's because Yaakov is really us, the most us. Yaakov is Yisrael, the father, our father, mostly, more than the other Avot. And therefore, I need to really zero in on everything that's mentioned about him. Hi, Flora, how are you? Everything that's mentioned about him, I need to zero in on. So let's sort of move into the story. Yaakov has a number of children. Rachel's child is Yosef, and then Binyamin. There's friction, there's envy, between Yosef and his brothers. And then Yaakov sends Yosef, the baby, not the baby, but a very young man, 16, 17-year-old, to follow his brothers in their Shem Dotan, meaning in this dangerous place that they went to shepherd their herds. He sends the youngest brother, who's not liked by his brothers, to a dangerous place to seek out his older brothers who are much better suited than he is to fend for themselves. This young man, Yosef, loses direction and is guided by, we believe, maybe Gabriel, an angel, some extraordinary person that was immersed into this place by God to find his brothers. He finds his brothers. We all know the story. I'm just going to give it to you briefly because then we're going to jump up and look at it. He finds his brothers and they want to kill him. And they make every effort to do so. They throw him into a pit with the intention of leaving him there. They first decide that maybe they'll kill him. Then they think about it and say, let's not do it directly. Let's put him in a pit so it happens on its own. And then Yehuda gives the worst, the most sinister of the advice. And he says, you know what? Let's make it even less direct. Let's move him to some group of nomads in the desert. Let's sell him. And look, whatever happens, happens. So let's remove our hand as much as possible from the evil, from the wrongdoing. Hi, Serena, how are you? From the wrongdoing. Let's remove his hand as much as possible. We all know the story. Another 2 or 3 minutes just to flesh it out. Yosef then is taken away. His brothers present the falsehood to their father about his disappearance. Yosef then is taken to Egypt, as we know, has a number of ups and downs, right? Is taken to becomes the head of a household, is falsely accused of certain things in that household, ends up in prison, ends up advising 2 men on their dreams. We're going to talk about all this in depth, and becomes the viceroy of Egypt. Okay, let's go back and see what's going on here. If we say that we're not going to focus on the story per se, we're going to focus on the big messages here, then we got to look at things differently. Let's start with the following. There is no Torah at this time, right? The Torah was given to Moshe Rabbeinu, not for a few thousand years, right? There's no Torah, not 1,000, 3,000 years yet, 1,000 or so years. So there's no Torah at this time. Everybody is trying to figure out how it works with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And what is HaKadosh Baruch Hu doing? He's making all these things happen. He's putting himself directly into the lives of our forefathers in order to show us how things work. Remember, we don't have many mitzvot yet. Maybe we have a handful, right? But we don't have the cornerstones of how to understand HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So he keeps immersing himself deeply into things in order for us to understand how to live with him. So, let's see. The question is raised, for example, when did Yaakov Avinu know that his son was alive? So the answer is he had a pretty good sense that he was. And how do we know that? We know it in a couple of ways. A, we know that Yitzchak, who was still alive at the time, knew that Yosef was alive. Our rabbis are in agreement on that. Yitzchak Avinu knew that Yosef was alive. Yaakov mourns him for 22 years. Lo Aleinu, we don't mourn something that's absolutely gone. We mourn something that's inaccessible. So Yitzchak knows that Yosef is alive. Yaakov has some conflicted feeling, knows that he can't get to his son, but doesn't have an absolute sense of his son being gone, and therefore mourns his absence for 22 years. So Yitzchak reasons, the question becomes, why didn't Yitzchak tell his son that his grandson is alive?
Right.
You would think that he would. And the answer is, remember, 10,000 feet. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is building his relationship with the world and building his relationship with us and putting the building blocks in place for the Jewish people. So Yitzchak reasons, Yaakov was a prophet. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu hid the prophecy from him that his son is alive, then Yitzchak must not tell him.
Yeah, but.
I was waiting for you, Sarah. I'm surprised it took this long. Yeah,
No, because when you're receiving a prophecy, you're receiving a prophecy for that particular event. That doesn't mean you could see every single thing in the world anyway. So maybe he didn't receive that prophecy that his son was. And why would Yitzchak let his son mourn for 22 years? It doesn't make sense.
excellent. Exactly. And that's why I want you to start down here and jump up here. Okay? Okay? So Yitzchak knows. Yaakov is not sure. And that's why he's in so much pain for such an extended period of time. There's a bigger plan going on here. Now, the flip side of the question is, call home. Why doesn't Yaakov phone home? Yosef phone home when he has the opportunity to do so? If he doesn't have the opportunity to do it when he's taken by the nomads, right? He certainly has the opportunity to do it when he's in the house of
Right.
Potiphar, right? Why
Yeah.
shouldn't he?
Yes.
Right? Why doesn't he? The answer is,
I read something, Ricky, let me see if I can remember it, that what would be the advantage of him letting Yaakov know that he was alive? It would only cause more jealousy with the, I mean, picture it, if he, okay, now he's calling his father, I'm alive, now what? So what advantage would it be?
beautiful. So that's
He
the,
also doesn't know what they told their father. He
You
doesn't
froze.
tell their father that he's where he is or what they did with him or anything.
say that again.
He doesn't really know what they told their father about him.
Very nice, Jane. Very nice. So let's build on both of your points. On the ground level, what you're saying, each of you is right on target. But I don't want you to operate there in the book of Bereshit. In the book of Bereshit in general, if there's a conversation about future books, we'll have a different conversation. But I want you to approach the book of Bereshit from up here only.
Oh.
I don't want you to look at it in terms of the specific details of the specific occurrences, because they're not made for that. They're not written for that. The same way when we read about the days of creation, so to speak, those 24-hour days, of course not. Of course they weren't. Did things, was there layers and layers and layers of things going on that's described in one sentence? Is that one sentence describe what happened from A to Z? Of course not. It describes what happened from A to Z on 100 levels at the same. Okay, so we don't want to be saying this about the book of Shemot and on, but we must say this about the book of Bereshit. We must listen to these human rationalizations and characterizations of what happened just for a minute. And then we have to have the courage, the intellectual courage, to step back and say, wait a second, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wrote every word, and he didn't write every word for anything but me understanding it on a complex level, on a life level. Now, you could say, we could give any rationalizations we want on this or that, but I want you to listen to those rationalizations. Yeah, why didn't Joseph call home? Why didn't Yitzchak tell his son that his grandson was okay? There's a lot of opinions. One opinion says that if Yosef reached out to his father would have realized what his other boys did, and maybe would have punished them, killed them for their attempted murder. Another opinion is that if Yosef called home and the brothers found out he was alive and they were about to be exposed in their treachery, they would come and kill him. And another opinion is that they would go and kill Yaakov rather than face his rage. And I want to tell you, hear those ideas and then step right above them. Step way above them. Because the stories in Bereshit are meant to not be looked upon on the level of a basic story. They're meant to be looked upon as a level of Hakadosh Baruch Hu shaping his involvement in the world and our involvement with him.
I feel like Bereshit, from what you're saying, is like talking to a young person, like a child, and then Shemot, he gets older and older and more
You
understanding.
know what, Sarah? I'm going to say that there is a difference, yeah. But Bereshit is talking about the most sophisticated person.
Wow.
The most sophisticated, and that's the trick, and you're hitting on it exactly. The trick is up here, step up here. Remember,
Oh,
every letter, every word,
it's written.
every pause that comes out of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's mouth, so to speak, is the most precious thing there ever could be. So is he going to tell me that brothers were jealous of a brother? Come on. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak, has much better things to do with his time, right? So hear those interpretations. I got it. But don't live there. Come
Okay.
up here.
Okay,
So
does.
why didn't Yosef call home, so to speak? Why didn't Yitzchak tell his son? Because they understood something very big had to happen. They understood something global and something local had to happen. And therefore, they're not going to break the pace, you know, and we need to understand one other thing. We measure time in minutes and seconds, right?
Right.
This is a good and a bad of the time we live in. But in ancient times, 22 years was a minute,
Yes, I agree.
was a minute. So when we say, how didn't Yosef call home, so to speak, for 22 years? Yes, was it painful for all of them? Of course it was. But again, up here, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Yosef understood that some essential things had to happen up here based on the experiences down there in order to establish how HaKadosh Baruch Hu would interact with the world and how the Jewish people would be formed.
So Ricky, is that how we should be thinking today?
1,000,000%. Love it, Diane. Perfect. 1,000,000%. When you read the book of Bereshit, just keep reminding yourself, this is God speaking. God didn't have to tell this story. God didn't have to use this word. God didn't have to set this. This is not some author telling a story. This is God. This is everything. And if he's telling me the story, he's not telling me a basic story that I'm going to apply my logic, my morals, my rationale to. That would be silly. He's telling me something that I'm going to think about and apply the greatest logic, eternal rationale to. The Yosef is living in all of us today. Yaakov is living in us today. This story is living in us today. What we went through to become the Jewish people based in this story is happening again and again and again and will continue to happen throughout time. The Torah is not a history book. It's happening right now. And if I step up, I can see that.
It's true.
So far?
Yes.
Push back. I want to hear it because I need you guys to move with me here.
Yes.
So work it. Serene, you okay with this?
Yeah, very interesting.
Huh? Yeah? Serene, you okay with it? Can't hear you. Okay. Any other points, questions on this? Okay, let's take a few more steps. Okay.
Very interesting, right?
Okay. So now let's see what happens. Yosef has these dreams, right? Let's talk about a dream. And again, whatever happens in the Chumash is happening right now. It's not something that happened then that I need to think about now. It happened then and it's happening now. So when a dream is described in the Chumash, it's today. And it's how I understand life today. So let's see. when when Yosef HaSadiq has his dreams, right? Let's talk about the dreams. The first dream is that there are stalks of wheat, let's say stalks of grain, and that they're all standing together, and the stalks of grain bow down to him, right? Okay. What does Yosef HaSadiq do? What does he do? He reaches out to his brothers and he asks them to comment on his dream, right? He reaches out to his brothers, hey, Robin, and he asks them to comment on his dream. Now, tell me, is this the first time we see a dream in the Sefer Bereshit? When do we see dreams before?
Oh, Yaakov.
What's his name?
Yaakov is a step.
Excellent. Excellent. The most telling dream is with Yaakov, right? When he's on Har Moriah, which has been remarkably moved to where he is, right? What does he do? He sees the dream with the ladder, right? So 1 second. I had a dream with Yaakov. I have another dream now with Yosef. One thing we're introduced to this idea that there's this thing called a dream. Again, we're not dealing down here, we're dealing up here, which means a dream then and a dream now have a lot in common.
Really?
So, let's talk about the Avimelech had a dream and Laban had a dream. Those were very local and very one-off. I'm not going to focus on them because they're not that important. But I want to focus on the dream of Yaakov Avinu, the dream of Yosef, the dreams of the butler and the baker, and the dream of Paro. We'll do it briefly. When Yaakov has his dream, right? What's going on there? How would you guys interpret that dream? What happens? What happens with Yaakov's dream?
He's by himself, so it's like Hashem is saying, I'm with you, I'm
Right,
here.
he's by himself. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is pledging his safety and security to Yaakov as he leaves the land of Israel, right?
I think there was inner conflict. There was a lot of inner conflict in Yaakov.
Beautiful. The inner conflict comes later. Excellent, Diane. Inner conflict comes later when he's confronted with his brother. But there's a tremendous amount of fear in Yaakov, and there's the unknown, right? So something very interesting happens here. Yaakov gets a dream and not a prophecy. And what that means is that there wasn't the same level of immersion in what HaKadosh Baruch Hu was telling him. He wasn't completely consumed by it. There's room for interpretation in a dream. There's much less room for interpretation in a prophecy. So what happens here? Yaakov has to go to sleep, right? Vayifka b'makom b'hashemesh, right? The place comes and confronts him. It all of a sudden gets dark in the middle of the day, and he has to close his eyes and go to sleep. He sees this vision, and then he ends up saying, "Manora makom zeh, en zeh ki bet Hashem shara shamayim." He acknowledges that the place has power. So what is Yaakov teaching us with this first dream? He's teaching us that certain places have different power than others. Certain places are closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu than others. We didn't know that. Nobody understood that. So let's see. We have the concept of a dream. We're talking about from way up here. The concept of the dream now, it's a dream that Yaakov Avinu experienced and that we want to learn from forever. What's one of the takeaways from this dream of Yaakov? That a place has power. And a place will always have different places, will have different power. Different places will bring different awareness. So when I'm in Jerusalem, for example, and if I feel more aware, that's a real thing. If I'm out walking on a beach, maybe, and I feel more aware, that could be a real thing. Because a dream is introduced to us as a level of prophecy, and a dream is introduced to us as something that can be place specific. So what do I learn from that first dream? I learned that I got to be aware of where I am, because forever and ever, I can learn more. I can be closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, depending where I am, if I'm just plugged in. Okay? So rather than just focusing on the angels going up and down, which was an important message, let's focus on the meta message, the giant message, which is how we approach dreams forever. And one of the elements of that is that a place has power. Different places have different levels of awareness that they bring with them. And we need to be on that.
Ricky, so I have a question. Okay, so we dream. So the place where we're dreaming in our bed has power, or the place in the dream itself
Beautiful.
is the power?
Beautiful. So the first thing,
Because he was at Mount Moriah.
so beautiful. So the first point is that the place where we are has power. And we need to be aware of that, that different places will allow me to be more self-aware. Different places will allow me to get closer to myself, to get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I need to be open to it. I need to be searching for it. You know, is for certain people, when they take a walk in a beautiful place, certain people, when they take a walk in a beautiful place, in an inspiring place, they're brought to a different level. And they shouldn't belittle that. That's real. A place does have power. A place does bring awareness. And we need to jot that down, because our search in life is to get closer and closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to get closer to ourselves. And if I'm aware of the fact that certain places are inherently closer, higher, and some of it is built into the place and some of it is built into how I and the place connect, then I'm going to achieve more. Then I'm going to be able to get closer to him, and I'm going to be able to get closer to me.
Rick, I have a question.
Yeah.
I thought that one of the purposes of the dream for Yaakov was that the opposite, that Yaakov was learning with in the tents of Shem Va'ever, and he thought he only could find Hashem in certain places. And then this dream told him, no, I'm with you everywhere.
Absolutely.
So isn't it really the opposite?
Yes,
Meaning-
I'm with you everywhere, but you know where I'm going to be more with you? Right here. Because when Yaakov wakes up, he goes, Manora makom hazeh. I can't even believe what I saw here. So yes, the message is, you're absolutely right. The message is, you can take me anywhere. But the other element here to understand is, wherever you take me, I'll be with you, but I'm not going to be with you the way I am here.
Didn't he call that spot Hashem Yira'eh?
Again?
Did he call that spot Hashem Yira'eh?
Yeah, great. It's great. It's a place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, right? You're going to see him. Yeah. So I want to differentiate between the points you and Serena making. Is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's message, was HaKadosh Baruch Hu's message, I'll be with you everywhere, without question. You can access me everywhere without question. Is it clear that he would access him to a greater level in the land of Israel and at that particular place? Without question. So you're right. We need to know, of course, we know that we can access God everywhere, but we also need to know that we can seek out places to access him on a higher level.
Got it.
Okay? Next, the dreams of Yosef. The dreams of Yosef, he invited his brothers in to help him interpret the dreams. So this brings with it a tremendous curveball. What do you mean? Did I see the dream and am I figuring it out, or are we figuring it out? And Kadosh Baruch Hu is teaching something very interesting here. And that is, with a dream, we're figuring it out. I'm not figuring it out. And this opens huge possibilities and areas to be careful of. The huge possibilities are, like happened with Yosef HaTzadik, and it happened again with the Sarah Mashkim and Sarah Ophim, and it happens again with Paro, where these people are inviting others into this very sensitive, very personal place of this unique vision in order to help them understand it. So what is HaKadosh Baruch Hu teaching us? That we, in certain places, we will be more inspired. Absolutely. We should look for those places. We should frequent those places as often as we can. Whether it's the land of Israel, whether it's the city of Jerusalem, whether it's a beautiful place to walk and to think, and those places are real. It's easier to reach HaKadosh Baruch Hu in certain places than others. We should look for them. We should find them. We should grow as a result of them. A. B, that this level of sharing with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is meant to be shared, meaning that we say that a dream goes according to its interpretation. Now that means that we have to be very careful with whom we're sharing our dream, but it also means that there's a collaboration here. There's a building, there's a sharing. What Yosef HaTzadik was doing when he told his dream to his brothers is he was telling them, do you get it? Can't you see? I'm going to change and I'm going to grow. And then we're going to be back together at some point. And now we can grow together. Don't you see? And they said, absolutely not. We don't. We see you trying to rule over us. And Yosef said, but that's not what I meant. I meant to show you that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to move us along to a place where we will come back together and we'll be in the field together. And we have an opportunity to grow together. What do they tell him? You're going to rule over us? You're going to bring a monarch over us? And he says, I don't know. That's not what I said. Point being that when somebody has a vision, somebody has a dream, it's an open book. It's something that they can be shared with the right person, and that person and them will build it together.
But you have to say it was a little bit forward. My father's going to bow down to me, or the brothers are going to bow down. I get what you're saying 100%, but it comes off differently.
Yeah, he said the sun and the moon and 11 stars were going to be bowing down to me, right? That's right. And now the question is, well, what's doing? Why is that happening? So we now can look at it and say, you know why it happened? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu manipulated events in their lives to an extent where Yosef is sold as a slave, becomes a viceroy. They're living in wealth and plenty and become impoverished.
No, I get it.
This so that Yosef can become Yosef, Yehuda can become Yehuda, the boys could grow into their own, and we can end up having a nation. So
he really saw the truth.
Yeah, he saw the truth and he invited them in.
And they didn't take it.
They weren't ready, and what they saw was something that reflected some type of immediate fear. What they didn't see was, well, one second, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you this, and you're sharing it with us to talk about the forever, to talk about where we would all be going, not to talk about now. So the brothers stumbled, so to speak, the same way people stumble when they learn the story today. They think they're talking about a local situation. What Yosef did is he came to them and said, guys, I don't know what this means, but there's something going on here. I know I'm younger than you. I know I'm not deserving of anything. Talk to me, share with me. I don't understand what was said here, but I do understand, Yosef says, that there's a big picture happening here. There's a huge picture, and I don't get it, but let's figure it out together.
So
And
really, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, really, they took their jealousy from the father favoring him and applied it to everything. They just applied it to Joseph on everything he was gonna do. They were jealous of him to begin with.
I want you to move above that, Sarah. I want you to go to one more point, Tara, and I want you to say that what he did is something, again, this is a roadmap forever. So it's a roadmap forever for us. It's as relevant, the story is as relevant for us. We're players in this story the same way they were. And the story for us is, don't look down here, look up here.
The bigger picture.
When something exceptional happens in life, don't look down here. When something happens in life where somebody has a vision, somebody whom we respect, somebody has an idea, somebody has a sense of what could be, don't look down here, blow it up, go up.
So Ricky, usually we're looking at the details in Judaism, but we're really not looking at the details here. We're looking at the whole picture.
Beautiful, Diane, beautiful, exactly. In the book.
And it's all part of a journey.
That's beautiful.
It's a journey.
Exactly. In the book of Bereshit, it applies to everything, of course. But in the book of Bereshit in particular, you cannot operate on a local level. You can't look at these stories from the context of how we spent our day to day. You got to say, wait a second, these are the greatest people in the history of the world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's every word and every letter is the greatest word and letter that would ever be. So if he's telling me a story, he's telling me the story of forever. He's telling me the story of life. He's telling me the story of what would ultimately be. I want to give you another example. We understand that we're not talking about a baseline story. B, we have a little bit of a new understanding of a dream. We're just touching on some concepts today. C, we have the perspective that we always look at a giant eternal picture. Now, what's happening here, in fact? What's happening is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is incredibly involved in the process. We see the term Vihine many, many times, right? We see the term Vihine many, many times. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is very involved in the process in order to move people, right? So what happens here? Yitzchak knows the story, doesn't say a word. Yaakov has a sense that there's something going on, trying to figure it out. Yosef understands that he and his brothers have to grow and have to become. Doesn't know how, but goes for it. When his father tells him, Yosef, go see how your sons are doing in Shlem, he tells him, Hineni, I'm ready, Daddy. What are you talking about? If we understand the story down here, Yosef, you know they can't stand you. What are you doing? How are you volunteering? How are you enthusiastic about it? He's volunteering, he's enthusiastic because he's looking at a very long term, which he doesn't know the ultimate outcome to, but he knows HaKadosh Baruch Hu is trying to make everybody figure things out. Let's talk about some of the other things that are being figured out here. Yeah, Sarah.
Well, that's the most amazing thing I ever heard.
Yeah, but I need you to be there. I'm so happy. I need you to be up here. Don't go here. And you're going to hear it here over and over and over. Remember, you're talking about the greatest people in the history of the world. You're talking about every letter, every pause, every word from God. He's not talking about jealousy. He's not talking about expediency. He's talking about what the world will look like forever. So let's touch on a few more of these points. When it says, I'm going to jump around a little bit, okay? When it says that when the brothers, you look at Yosef's brilliance, his remarkable sidkut. Why do we call Yosef a Sadiq? Some of us learned together what a Sadiq is. A Sadiq is a person who understands his or her kohot, understands his or her strengths, and has the courage to put them out there and to engage the world that way. And that's who builds the world, the Sadiq, right? That's who has a guaranteed place in Olam Haba, the Sadiq, right? The Sadiq is a person who says, I know what I can do. I'm scared. I don't know where it's going to ultimately take me, but I know I have the kochot. I know I have the strength. I know I have the talent and the tools to do X. I'm going to do it. Who epitomizes that? Yosef, young man. He's a baby. He's a baby. At the pinnacle of the story, he's 30 years old. It's remarkable. His resilience is remarkable, right? His strength, his understanding of who he is, his ability to project deep into the future, right? And to live true to himself. So what does he do? When the brothers come down, he accuses them of being duplicitous. He accuses them of being dishonest. By the way, were they? 100%. Right?
Right.
Weren't they duplicitous with their father? Of course they were. He accuses them of what they are. Why? Because he needs them to own up to what they are. Why? Because we're all going to be there someday. Because what they're going through, we will all go through. When they're looking at things on a very base level and not a big level, we're all going to do that. And then what does he do? He tells them, okay, you guys don't get it yet. I'm really gonna, get you guys a little bit crazy. He gives them their money back in the sacks. What? They go crazy. What is he doing? He says they're not there. They don't understand. There's a bigger thing happening here. We need to build a nation. We need to have a different relationship with God. I'm going to tell you another thing. The brothers, they didn't understand life yet. All they saw until this time was Ishmael, right? The good guy and the bad guy, so to speak. By the way, in the end, Ishmael is not a bad guy, if we remember. When they describe the death of Abraham Avinu, it says Vayigva, Vayamot. Rashi says on that place that when you use two terms to describe the death of somebody, it means that they are a righteous person. When Ishmael dies, it says Vayigva, Vayamot. So Ishmael dies as a Sadiq, pretty amazing. But in their world, in the world of the brothers, there were the good guys, Yitzchak, and there was Ishmael. There was the good guy, Yaakov, and there was Esav. It was black and white. It was yes and no. They didn't understand gray yet. They didn't understand bechira as opposed to gezerah, or they didn't understand what choices meant. They didn't understand what the world was. Yosef was either good or he was bad. The situation was either good or bad. They were either going to make it or not, but that's not life. Life is overwhelmingly gray. The brothers didn't get that yet. Yosef had to teach them that. They were duplicitous. They only saw the world in very certain terms. That's not the world. Yosef at 17 can't be judged to be a threat to everybody. It's not black and white. But it is, because it's either Yitzchak or Ishmael. It's either Yaakov or Esav. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. It's everybody in between. So he sends them back with the money. He sends them back with the money again. He sends them back with the goblet, right? And then and in the process of that, actually in the early stages, it says that Yosef recognized them, but they didn't recognize him, meaning Yosef had already begun to change, but they hadn't. So as we go through the process, we're introduced to a number. We're reminded of the fact that even when stories are told on a seemingly human and local level, they're not meant to be looked at that way. Whenever you read a story in the Chumash, particularly in the book of Bereshit, look up here. Point one. I'm recapping briefly. The concept of a dream is something real. It's potent. It exists in our lives. It needs to be embraced by us. We need to be open to it. We know that the dreams that a person has in the morning hours are the most important dreams, the most telling, the most true. We also understand that a dream is collaborative. So it's the dreamer and the one who can explain it. Most often, our rabbis teach us, the dream is explained in and of itself, in the dream itself. But we need to recognize this, that we will have dreams, that it's a real thing. That's point number 2. Point 2A, certain places will inspire us to have a greater connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu than others. We know at a festive meal, we're elevated. The physical elements of the festive meal elevate us spiritually. We can connect more to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Many of us have been to Israel. We know that being in certain parts of Israel will elevate us. We've been to beautiful country. We've been to beautiful beaches. Those will elevate us. Those are real. We see things happening. And this is the biggest message that I want to leave you with today. When we see things happening in life, and we don't look at them on a basic mundane level. We need to understand the same way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was manipulating constantly in the lives of Yosef and his brothers, of Yaakov and his children. He's doing the same with us. He's up here attempting to move things down here so that we move up as much as possible. So we break the chains. You know, there's a beautiful thing that the Ramchal writes in the Mesilat Yesharim that I learned with the boys a few days ago. He says that passivity, laziness, rationalization, the things that we all do in order to avoid growing, in order to avoid reaching beyond ourselves, in order to avoid reaching a higher level in our learning or reaching a higher level in our connectedness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that becomes a force in and of itself. So the abstinence of growth, lack of movement, isn't a passive thing, according to Ramchal. It's an active thing. It becomes something that I'm invested in. It becomes a force in my life. Out. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not going to allow it. He's going to be up here and he's going to keep throwing stuff at us. The way he threw stuff at Yaakov, the way he threw stuff at Yosef, the way he threw stuff at the brothers. I want to give you maybe 1 or 2 more pieces. Are we okay so far?
Yep,
Yes, yes.
very good.
All right.
Excellent.
All
Mhm.
right. Okay, good. Let's talk about for a minute the story of the butler and the baker, right? Their dreams. So the butler had a problem, right? He came to Pharaoh with a bug in his cup of wine. Okay? He failed. He didn't properly keep his eye on the wine that he brought to the most powerful ruler of that time in the world. And he brings the cup of wine to Pharaoh with a big fat bug in it. So what does Pharaoh do? Pharaoh throws him in jail with all of the people, all the slaves who worked under him, who prepared the wine for the monarchy. The baker has a similar problem, not the same problem, but a similar problem. The baker prepares the bread, but in the baker's case, who prepares the bread? The people who work under him, the slaves who work under the baker. They prepare the bread. He only brings it to Pharaoh. He also failed in that he brought a loaf of bread to Pharaoh with a bug in it. So,
Yeah.
So they and their servants get thrown in jail. The rabbis say that a year passes and the court, the Egyptian court, is deliberating what the verdict should be for these men. On the one hand, in terms of the butler, he's really at fault, not his servants. On the other hand, in terms of the baker, he's really not at fault. It's his servants who are, because the servants failed to find the bug. You with me? So the butler on the surface really has a problem. The baker on the surface really doesn't. What ends up happening? The reverse. And what do we believe happened? What happened is as follows. The courts adjudicate and say as follows. Butler, the Sara Mashkim, he should have been more aware, but he wasn't. So he's punishable by death, la alenu, as are all his servants. The baker should have been more on top of his servants, but he wasn't. Therefore, even though it wasn't directly his fault, he's going to be punishable by death as well, la alenu. But then what happens? It seems that the butler would be the one who would help Yosef. And therefore, the butler's life is spared. Now, here again, if you're looking at it on a local level, on a basic level, the story doesn't make sense. The butler, the Sara Mashkim, was really more culpable for the failure than the Sara Ofim, than the baker. Why does the butler survive?
Ricky, didn't you tell us
Why?
that? I remember learning that wasn't the butler more active? He took an active role and he was doing, as opposed to the baker who was letting things, like he was passive. He really didn't have an active role. And then when Yosef was interpreting the dreams, wasn't that the same thing? The butler was an active in his dream, and then the baker was letting things happen to him.
And therefore, what?
And therefore, I guess the butler, at least he was trying. So maybe he gets out, and the baker just doesn't really get out because he's letting things happen to him.
Beautiful. But so I'm going to take your point and extend it one step further. The butler's activity based on this approach is what enabled him to get out because he was going to step up and express his gratitude to Yosef, which the baker would not have done. So assuming he was more verbal, he was more active, that enabled him to earn himself a place in the big picture of the development. Nice. So where do we end up? We end up with a platform to build a people. Yosef grows and changes. The boys grow and change. Yaakov is made aware of the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be manipulating things over an extended course of time in order to build. And even Yaakov needs to learn that, and he does. Yehuda, we know, who would ultimately have to assume a position of leadership, it's a great failure, and rebuilds his life, right? As a result of Tamar. Well, there again, the building of Yehuda didn't have to do with what was going on just then. The building of Yehuda was an expression of who Yehuda would be forever, of who his children would be. When Yehuda says, Sadka mimeni, she was right and I was wrong, he sets the paradigm for Jewish leadership forever. So Yosef steps up. Yaakov understands HaKadosh Baruch Hu on a much greater level. The sons become and step up what they need to be each one an essential contributor to the Jewish people, a builder, a partner. Yehuda steps up to understand what leadership and monarchy is, what benevolent monarchy is, what kind monarchy is, which is what is personified by David and his son Shlomo over time, which means I can apologize to the people and I could say I was wrong. And that's essential for our king, who, although he will be the king over us and will ultimately have Mashiach from that same family, they have to be built a certain way. So, in these 3 or 4 parashiot, we're seeing is not simply the story of Yaakov and his children, or Yosef or Yehuda. What we're seeing is the blueprint of how we're going to live with God and how the Jewish people are going to take shape. Things will take time, things will develop, things will often not be clear. They will only become clear in retrospect. They will only become clear with a grand vision. And they will only become clear when we see pieces together. And in the upcoming parasha in Vayechi, we see how Yaakov now understood how the Jewish people, based on his children and how they express themselves individually and come together, would form this remarkable people that would serve God. So it's a little bit of a more difficult way to do it, to understand it. But I want to suggest that this is how we frame our understanding of Bereshit. And in terms of our own lives, even though we're dealing with the local, even though we're dealing with the day-to-day, remember that nothing is evaluated based on the day-to-day. Life is evaluated based on a lifetime. No one's life is codified or described well until 100 years. That's when we can really understand life and understand the person. And if we continue to pick our heads up and look up and try to look at the big play and try to understand the big movement and try to make sure we're part of it as much as we can, then we're engaging in the building of the world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu affords for us to engage.
Fantastic. That was
Thoughts,
good.
questions?
That was great.
Thank
No, you
you.
know,
We're okay with this one? Laura, how are you?
Great, thank you.
I'm
That
in
was great.
Acapulco.
Oh, yeah, look, oh, yeah. that was
Have a good time.
That's up to
good.
you.
Yeah, enjoy.
Thank you. But I love your class. Thank you, Ricky.
Thank you. I'm so happy to see everybody.
Thank you. Ricky.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Ricky,
Everybody, good
Thank
thing.
you, Ricky.
so much.
Thank you.
That was mind lift. That was mind.
Are we on for next week? What
We're
do
on
we?
for next week. The next, I'm gonna, God willing, it'll be from Jerusalem for the next
Oh,
2 or 3 weeks.
wow.
So it'll be
Wow.
only from the old city, God willing.
That's
That's
awesome.
nice.
Wow,
Okay,
beautiful.
Enjoy.
send us-
Much better than
Enjoy,
that.
Rabbi.
Looking forward. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good luck with Sylvia. Good luck with Sylvia.
Have
Thank
a
you.
safe